We've been listening to Sheriff Joe Lombardo and a host of federal and local officials and members of Congress speaking on the tragedy, the mass murder in Las Vegas, Nevada. Some of the updates we heard, the death toll now at 59 victims. That's a death toll of 59, not counting the shooter. They discussed the 18 firearms that were recovered, including a range of the types of weapons, several assault-style weapons that had been modified. 527 injuries is the latest count. We heard from two members of Congress there speaking in their capacity as representing the constituents in and around the Las Vegas area. And yet, as we're speaking, and as you can see on your screen, debate continues in the Congress. Over the last few minutes, we were showing in the corner Senator Chris Murphy, who was speaking on gun control on the floor of the Senate. And this hour, in about 15 minutes, we're told the U.S. House of Representatives will weigh in with a moment of silence on the House floor. And as we've been watching these scenes unfold throughout the day today, the SWAT teams also were told, according to that briefing, preparing to storm a breach on a North Nevada home. The authorities not adding a ton of detail of what or why and declining to do so when asked. Also, the other important takeaway from that briefing, quote, no working motive. Again, quote, no working motive on exactly why Stephen Paddock did this mass murder, the highest death toll of any mass shooting in modern American history. I want to turn now to some of our experts who continue to follow this. NBC's Chris Jansing has been live reporting for us on the ground right outside Mandalay Bay. I'm also joined by Eugene O'Donnell, a former NYPD officer, now a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, as well as a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal, Matthew Fogg. On the law enforcement side, gentlemen, I want to come to you in a moment. But Chris, I want your response, your analysis, and your updates, anything that comes to mind for you coming out of that briefing or what else you're seeing in your reporting.
Well, this is a community, obviously, that remains in shock. A state of emergency has been declared in Clark County. And the numbers that you just mentioned, Ari, are mind-boggling. 59 people dead, as you said. They've also upped the number of people who are injured to 527. At UMC, which is the only level 1 trauma hospital in this area, 104 people were admitted. 12 of them, as of earlier today, were in critical condition, which is why officials are saying those numbers are fluid. They fear that that death count could go even higher. But we did get additional information right behind me, Mandalay Bay. That is where police say Stephen Paddock took a hammer or some sort of tool, knocked out a couple of windows. He set up his guns there. Some of them we heard had scopes on them, 16 in all on those rifles. But in addition to that location, the area where there were 22,000 people who literally, many of them ran for their lives, not knowing where that gunfire was coming from last night. They went to his home in Mesquite, and there they found 18 additional firearms, several thousand rounds of ammunition and explosives. What strikes me so much as someone who has covered these stories dating back almost 20 years to Columbine, Ari, is that this doesn't fit any kind of pattern that we have seen. This is a 64-year-old man. According to his brother, he was a multimillionaire. It wasn't somebody who necessarily would seem from the outside to be unhappy with his life. He was in a relationship. He was in a nice retirement community. He loved to come here to Vegas. This was a place he enjoyed. So successful. No outward ideology, and at least according to his brother, Ari, just a couple of weeks ago, made a phone call like any of us might make to check on his mom, who had lost power in one of the hurricanes. The question remains here, why? Ari?
Exactly. Chris, stay with me. I go to Matthew on the question of why, and put in context what the authorities just said, that it's early yet, but for the very reasons that Chris just outlined, the lack of any pattern profile, no working motive here.
That's the difficulty oftentimes with these type of events. And let me just also give condolences to the family and the friends of those who were affected by this maniac. But that's the problem. You don't know sometimes when people might change. My thought is, when you have these outside events that have often, when you got so many people in one particular area, I think, law enforcement, I think what we're going to start finding is that we're going to have counter snipers or even helicopters, surveying the area, making certain that you don't have these type of things, because it appears to me that as we move into the future, we're going to have more of these type of incidents. So we have somebody to stop it.
And that's
maybe in advance.
such a concern. Matthew, Fogg, Eugene, and Chris, all please stay with me. I want to pause this discussion and go over to Capitol Hill. Congressman Rosa DeLauro has been standing by, a Democrat from Connecticut, and I know, Congresswoman, that you also have to move for the moment of silence that I mentioned. Your thoughts today?
Well, certainly, look, I mean, this is horrific in the scale of the violence, the loss of life, 59 people, over 500 people injured. It really is stunning in terms of the violence and the bloodshed. And our hearts go out to the families of those who have lost their lives and lost a loved one, but to those who are injured. This is, we cannot continue this way. We say each and every time there is an event, and we can go back to Columbine, we say never again. We say never again in Aurora, in Charleston, in Sandy Hook, in Orlando, and now in Las Vegas. And yes, on the floor of the House of Representatives tonight, we will have a moment of silence, and we will pray. And we will pray for the families who have been so hurt. But the families who have been hurt and the American people need to know that we are going to do more, that we are going to undertake action on their behalf so that we can keep them safe. From this gun violence. It has to stop.
So,
and it has to
Congresswoman,
stop now.
That goes to what we're hearing. I mentioned earlier in the hour, Senator Chris Murphy was on the floor making a direct argument for gun control, and he spoke out after Sandy Hook, as you know. The White House today said you can't have a policy response to the incident if you don't have sufficient facts yet. Do you disagree with that? Do you think you know enough to go ahead?
We need a policy response because this is not a one-time incident. Yes, it is the largest mass murder that we have seen through gun violence in the United States, but we have had several examples. I can recall Sandy Hook. My heart breaks every day for Sandy Hook with 20 babies. It was a slaughter of the innocent. 5 adults. What we need to do now is to make sure that what we can do is to bring to the floor of the House of Representatives votes on banning assault weapons, banning high-capacity magazines, having background checks, allowing us to do research on gun violence. And what we ought to do, and what Speaker Ryan ought to do immediately, is to take off the floor of this House a bill that's coming up this week for a vote, which is to put silencers on guns. So in fact, we could have even more people killed, and we won't know about it until after the fact. We have to act. This is not just one time. We have enough data and enough evidence to know what we have to do. We have a moral responsibility to do something. Otherwise, we are failing. We are failing the people of this country whose lives are at stake, and we are sitting here doing nothing about it.
Strong words. Congresswoman DeLauro, thanks for making time before the moment of silence on the House floor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to turn to NBC's Jolyn Kent, who is at a blood drive in Las Vegas. What are you seeing there?
Well, the lines are epic, and what has happened here is there's been an all-call for blood donations, and the public here in Las Vegas is completely turned out in a massive way. I'm going to show you this line, and it lasts at least about 5 or 6 hours. We were talking to people who came after work, and they found that they would be waiting 5, 6, maybe even 7 hours. And what you see here are donations in action right now, folks bringing in water, food, all kinds of things, burritos, corn dogs, to sustain everyone as they wait in line in the hot sun as the sun goes down here in Las Vegas. But what we see is an extraordinary outpouring of support. And you've got families, you've got people who are taking the day off because they heard what happened last night. They heard what happened this morning, and they decided they had to do something. And the reason the blood donation is so important is that blood donations, of course, expire, as many of you guys know. You can come through. You donate 1 pint here, and you can donate 1 pint of blood every 8 weeks. other people who've been standing in line for hours here. You can see they're donating platelets, they're donating plasma as well, and there's this huge need, not just here in Las Vegas, but they say if they get anything extra, they'll be sharing that wealth around the country. So what you've got here, I want to, Steve, if you can show all of the different donations that have come in for the hundreds of people, maybe upwards of 1,000 people who've been waiting here all day. And this is a blood center that usually closes by this hour, and instead they are here. They're going to stay open as long as they can to take in these donations. But what you see here is one word. It's all about unity here in Las Vegas. Back to you guys.
Jolene Kent, thank you for that report, and certainly an uplifting side of what has been such a horrific day for the community. I want to go back to two guests we were speaking to right before I spoke to Congresswoman DeLauro to rejoin us. That's Eugene O'Donnell and Chris Jansing, who was, as I mentioned, on the, Matthew Fogg, I should mention, and Chris Jansing out in Mandalay Bay. Matthew, pardon my interruption earlier. I was speaking to someone right in that building behind you who wanted to make her message known before going in for the moment of silence on the House floor that we're awaiting. You were speaking before about security measures when I interrupted. As well, I wanted your views on the patterning issue, on the profile issue, because we so often hear about law enforcement looking at these cases, and this one doesn't match up. This one seems to be a late in life act without any discernible public predicate in behavior by this individual.
Right, that's true. But the problem is we see over and over now, these things are happening even greater. Each incident is happening further. And when you're talking about the lone wolf, you're talking about a situation like this, we have to have some way of being able to determine when these things are going to happen. If they do happen, how can we respond so effectively and quickly to where this person doesn't have an opportunity to kill as many people? This guy was shooting a .223 round, which that round travels over 3,000 feet per second, and it travels 100 yards. So you're talking about 10 football fields. He had enough weapons and he had enough equipment from the different houses that they're finding out that it would seem that somebody would have known something and would have known something motive that this guy had or was doing something. But the fact is, they're saying right now through the investigation they haven't found any links to this man. But if we had these guns registered or we knew how to locate these weapons and knew where these weapons were, to me that would be a great start in maybe trying to stop this type of unknown element of people doing these types of things.
Matthew Fogg, thank you.